evening, everyone. My name is Alex Kelly, and I'd like to welcome you to the 8th webinar in our Forestry Solutions series. Tonight's topic is looking at European research and the impact on the ground. Our own group, the Irish Wood Producers, were involved in a European project, Horizon 2020. The project was called SimWood, and it was a great learning curve for our local group. And one of our panelists this evening and our chairperson for this evening were instrumental in the delivery of that project. I'd like to introduce you to our chairperson for this evening, Professor Aine from Forestry, UCD. Aine runs the degree program in the college, and she's also director of the teaching and learning program as well. Aine has been responsible for lots of research in forestry, so I'm going to hand you over to Aine now. Thank you, Aine.
Thanks, Alex, and welcome everybody to this week. I'm muted. Can you hear me now? I think I'm okay now. So as I said a moment ago, I'd like to welcome you to this week's Forestry Solutions webinar. The topic of this week's webinar is European forest research. And as Alex has already pointed out, both myself and herself, and indeed one of our speakers, were involved in a European project some years ago looking at wood mobilization. And here in UCD, we've been involved in quite a number of EU projects, many of them focusing on developing forest management tools that better address the various demands that are being placed now on forest goods and services. We're a small group here in UCD Forestry, but we're doing a broad range of research looking at continuous cover forestry. And I know you had a PhD student of mine some weeks ago, Ted Wilson, addressed the webinar. You've also, as a group, been very helpful to me in any research I've been conducting on forest owners. And indeed, another PhD student of mine, Jeremy Ryan, I believe, will have spoken to some of you in the last couple of years or so. And so, as I say, we cover a broad range of topics here in research: agroforestry, forest recreation, harvest, impact mitigation, tree improvement, etc. So I'm really interested in finding out what our speakers have to say. So before we kick off, we're going to have a short, a very brief, I think, film from the European Forest Institute. The European Forest Institute is an international organization established by European states, and it conducts research and provides policy support on forestry related issues. So this brief film, I think, arises out of a project that address some of the key questions in relation to forestry in the EU. So without further ado, I'll think the film is going to start. Well, that was a very interesting overview of some of the key statistics in relation to EU forests. And I'd like now to introduce our first speaker. Dr. Uwe Kies is the Secretary General of Innovawood in Brussels. Innovawood is a European network of 60 organizations in 28 countries, and it represents a common voice for research, innovation and education in the field of wood science and technology. And as I said earlier, Uwe and I met maybe 6 or 7 years ago in a very interesting project, and I'm delighted that he's able to come here tonight, well, able to Zoom in here tonight and tell you a little bit about R&D projects and innovation initiatives in forestry and the wood industry sector. So I'll hand over to you, Uwe.
Yeah, and good again. That I can hook up with you for this topic. And I present you a few aspects that we have created out of Zimwood. Going up in other as with 20 organizations members in all across. But we are wood research.
Sorry, Uwe, how are you? This is Chris here. Uwe, we're having a problem with your audio. It's coming in and out. I think it's something to do with the way your mic. It's just not picking up properly.
Because try this. Is the sound a little bit better?
That's much better.
Okay, yeah, I think it's the Wi-Fi. So sorry for that. I just repeat if people haven't heard it. So Innovawood is a European network. We are mainly focused on wood science and research. A lot of our member organizations are universities, research organizations like labs and testing centers, focused a lot on the material use of wood and anything related to it, furniture, wood construction, wood products. So this is our main focus, but we also have several activities in forestry and are also being a partner in several forestry projects. So when it comes to Horizon Europe projects, as you know, this is quite a competitive area where, all over Europe, people apply for funding programs. And then this leads to this kind of European projects, a consortia of 10 to 15 to 20, sometimes even more partner organizations who work together for a certain period of time, 4 to 5 years, normally to address a research question or a question of innovation in a specific area in this specific amount of time. Zimwood has been one project about wood mobilization, and as Aine and Alex already mentioned, there were a lot of local organizations involved. We had a huge network of, I think, something like 15 regions or so in Europe, representing really the local situations and the local challenges that are specifically addressed by private forest owners. Out of that came basically 2 follow-up projects, which are called Rosewood, and now the latest project, Rosewood 4.0. They, in a way, picked up the same idea of addressing forest owners and their challenges. And they created a network of hubs, which means there were actually local organizations which created a network around them, specifically within their countries and their neighboring countries. And the project is still ongoing. It's called Rosewood 4.0. I will now try to share the screen and show a few slides about that project. Let me see. Can you see that? Is it coming?
Yes, we can see that. That's right.
Great. Okay, I will go to the presentation mode quickly. This project is coordinated by Steinbeis Europazentrum in Karlsruhe in Germany. And the main lead partners are Innovawood and EFI. And we have, I think in total 20 partner organizations. So the aim of this project is actually to create a platform for forest owners and for organizations active in forestry, trying to spread knowledge, innovation opportunities, and specifically in this Rosewood 4.0 project, looking into tools that are, helping to digitalize the forest sector and to innovate specifically with new technologies. So the idea is to create a common platform and knowledge base for sustainable wood mobilization, and creating something like a pilot, if you want, for a European ARCIS. These ARCIS are, let's say, developed in agricultural knowledge and information systems, but we know forestry is as important, if not even more, in this current debate. And so really spreading, knowledge and information between foresters in Europe, and achieve a greater acceptance of these different solutions that are maybe developed quite locally, but that are actually should be known and should be disseminated much more. So we worked on a journey, on a joint survey with several of these organizations. We screened a lot of regional and local solutions. We selected the best ones that seemed to be fitting, for this kind of knowledge transfer. And we also validated in workshops and online meetings between the different hubs that we have in this project. In total, we have 5 hubs covering the North, Central Europe, Central Eastern Europe, South, and the Southwestern and Southeastern hub, actually. We had also several workshops where we engaged, with local stakeholders, providing these inputs. Are these solutions and these best practices are relevant? Are they useful for us? Are they interesting for other regions? And sort of created really a community of stakeholders that were engaged with the project. And this is ongoing. The project is still in the final phase. It will continue until June this year. And we will actually have our final event in the mid of June in Barcelona, in Catalonia. So in this database, we collected a lot of best practices, also building on Simwood, building on the first Rosewood project, and building on national initiatives to collect these examples. We ended up with a long list of almost 450 best practices, and selected a closer set of 50 best practices in the first step, and in the second step, another 50 best practices that are really being actively shared now between these hubs. I will not go so much into detail, but we have developed this platform. It's this link here, Forest Innovation Hubs, Rosewood Network. It's an open portal where you can query the database and filter out the topics that are interesting for you, and you get a list of possible fact sheets that relate to this query that you are adding. You can filter for countries, you can filter for type of solutions. The platform is also multilingual, so you can even search per language. But the translation of most of these fact sheets is still ongoing. And if you want, you can also add your own best practice to the platform. There is somewhere, I don't remember now here, a button where you can add, and then you can provide your own fact sheet. It will be submitted to our group, and it will be checked and validated, and then you can publish also your own best practices or innovations or any initiatives that you have in the region. So this is how a fact sheet looks like. You can add photos, visuals, videos, links, and of course also the contact data is included. So it's very easy to get a quick overview of what this best practice is about. Then we also created a series of video clips. In total, I think we have now almost 30 video clips prepared for these kind of solutions. So these were selected in the hubs, and they really are a small video, 4 or 5 minutes, showcasing really the solution. Usually also in the national language, but everything is translated with English subtitles, and it can be really used also across the regions. Just a quick few examples. So actually, we grouped the best practices according to different challenges as a very easy way to guide the users also towards these different solutions. So the first challenge, we call it globally improve forest resilience and adaptation to climate change. And for example, here you have an example from Sweden. It's a company develops some kind of services using drone and AI analysis to really do a precision mapping of bark beetle infestations in forest stands. It's quite a known company in Sweden already. And yeah, let's see if this works. If I click here, oh, probably I need to change the screen. Yeah, I think it's a bit too complicated now. So in the presentations, you can also immediately go to that fact sheets if you click on that screen. Yeah. The second one is the second challenge we address is about infrastructures and capacity of public forest actors, because they are really heavily engaged in developing data structures, collecting national inventory data, and so on. So in this group, you find all sorts of solutions that fit public actors and create data platforms, inventory structures, information campaigns for the public. And yeah, this example that leads you to the Forest Data Bank in Poland, for example. The third challenge is probably the most interesting for you. It's activating private forest owners and support cooperative forest management. And there you find many examples, for example, of this e-services and national platforms for forest owners, where forest owners can connect, can provide probably their own data and get management plans, management tools, plannings, optimization of harvesting. There are also a lot of platforms where you trade wood, where you sell timber, where you find forest operators that provide you with forestry services. There's a whole lot of series of this kind of electronic platforms dedicated to private forest owners. Challenge number 4 is about training and enhancing the skills of people in the forestry sector. Also a lot of examples from across Europe. So the one that we picked here is called My Forester. It's developed by the Slovenian State Forest Agency. And yeah, they have sort of a platform where all the forestry contractors inscribed and where they actually as in a way assessed. It's about good practices in forest management by contractors. And there's a whole, I think, address book behind, and you can get an impression how this works. Challenge number 5 is about enhancing the performance of the whole forest supply chain. So this is linking forestry with sawmills, with wood processing industries. And there we collected many examples of specific solutions for let's say digital sawmills and wood supply. But there are also many examples where in countries you have this kind of Industry 4.0 centers now, being set up for forestry. It's usually a research center partnering with IT providers and also public actors to create sort of a competence center on Industry 4.0 related to forestry. Quite nice examples. They have virtual forests. They have this kind of optimization tools for forest supply chains, for operators. How can you bring in sensors in your management? Also ecological sensoring. Yeah, this is something new, that they actually equip whole forest stands with data loggers and collect environmental data throughout the whole year about drought, about water supply, about temperatures, and so on. Quite an, let's say, a field also for research and development. Yeah. Challenge number 6 is about the forest bioeconomy and also circular uses. So it's much about wood products. So you have examples like this digital sawmill here in Sweden. You have examples about wood construction projects, about regional campaigns on wood construction, and so on. Challenge number 7 collects anything related to public awareness, social acceptance. So this, you find a lot of examples about national campaigns about forestry and yeah, the role of forests for the society. This is actually a nice example from France, La Forêt Bouge. The forest is moving. It's really a national awareness campaign about the role of private forest owners. And they, you know, also attract, they also want to mobilize and activate these urban owners who are not so connected to their property anymore. And challenge number 8 collects anything transversal, I mean, other things related to funding, innovation, digital hubs. This is an example of a hackathon that is organized by the university in Austria, the Boku University. They have an annual event with students where they actually put out a challenge and the students create ideas for innovation in forestry and in wood products. Yeah, I will not show much more. So we have a website for the projects where you also can see all these examples, find all these clips. There is also an activity about training tools. There is a whole online Moodle series of training that is also being translated in English and in different languages, created by a German state forest organization. And yeah, many more examples to find there. So, yeah, here finally we have the map. So this is the project consortium. You can see that we cover in total, I think, I don't remember, something like 15 or 17 countries, but they are organized into 5 hubs coordinated by a lead partner, and they actually are small consortia on their own. And that was, let's say, the selling idea for the Commission, that this kind of hub network can also live on after the project ended. And we are right now just discussing with EFI and all the partners, how can we make this a living network that can live after the project funded by the EU has ended. Okay, I think that's enough on rosewood. And where's this button? Yeah. I don't know, how do you want to proceed? Shall I give a few more insights, or shall we leave that for a discussion round? What?
Uwe, I think what we might do is there's a Q&A, and the attendees can put their questions into the Q&A, and what we might do is move on to the next speaker.
Fine with
speakers, and then at the end, I'll be monitoring the Q&A, and so can you indeed, if there's a specific question there that addresses what you covered. So thanks, Uwe. That was very interesting, looking at all the ways and examples of how other regions have addressed particular challenges in relation to forestry and forest owners, and that information is available to forest owners all over Europe through that website.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So our next presentation is a joint presentation And it's going to be given by Dr. Dermot, who's the head of the Department of Creative Education, and Mr. Sean Garvey, lecturer, GMIT Letterfrack School of Design and Creative Arts, both the GMIT, the Galway Mayo Institute of Technology. So just a little bit about Dermot. Dermot has worked with GMIT since 1999 and was head of the Centre for GMIT Letterfrack, which is Ireland's national centre for excellence in furniture design and technology from 2006 to 2019. And Dermot, as well as managing programme development, he's managed a number of research projects, both with industry partners in Ireland and indeed across Europe through the Erasmus Plus in the area of wood technology and education. And he was one of the founding members of the Irish Wood and Interiors Network and has recently completed a PhD in higher education research with Lancaster University, focusing on education for sustainable development. He will co-present with Sean Garvey, who has 20 years experience as a lecturer in GMIT and Letterfrack campus. Sean is the chair of the furniture design and manufacture and furniture making and architectural woodworking programs. And he's also co-supervised a master's research project looking at the working properties and utilization of small diameter Irish grown alder. And he too has a keen interest in close to nature forestry and is the treasurer of ProSilva Ireland. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to, I think, Dermot, who's going to start, and then Sean, who will do the next bit of the presentation.
Thanks very much, Anya. I'm just going to start this slide presentation. So hopefully you can see that okay now.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thanks.
Perfect.
Dermot.
So thank you, Anya and Alex, and for the introduction and also for the invitation to present this evening. I'm joined by my colleague, Sean Garvey, and we're going to talk through a presentation called Hardwood Connections, Closing the Loop on the Value Chain for Irish Hardwoods. And I suppose it's a case study really of what we've been doing in the campus in Letterfrack of the Galway Mayo Institute of Technology. So hopefully it'll make some connections with yourselves this evening as well. So just to in the context of where we are and the campus that we work, the Letterfrack campus of Galway Mayo Institute of Technology is one of 5 campuses. It's probably the smallest third level campus in the country. Established in 1987 in collaboration with a community development organisation called Connemara West. And there's a speciality of programs here in furniture design, architectural woodworking, also teacher education in the areas of construction studies and design, communication, graphics. Approximately 240 full-time students. Probably one of the big shifts in our thinking happened through the Green Campus. And we use the Green Campus program, which is facilitated and coordinated by Antashka, part of the UNESCO Green Schools program, actually. And we got involved in that in 2014 when we got our first green flag. And this was, I suppose, at a time where we found there was a lot of interest in areas around, I suppose, improving the sustainable performance of the campus, embedding sustainability into the education programs. And both Sean and I were very much at the heart of that discussion. And I think a lot of the presentations this evening emanated from the work of some of that Green Campus Committee. And I suppose just a point to note, while we have multiple hats and identities, in April this year, GMIT will merge with IT Sligo and Letterkenny IT to become the Atlantic Technological University. So we will then become a 9-campus university, and with the fun that will bring. So it's an exciting time, though, in higher education, and a lot of more collaboration, I suppose, will come from that. Just to show you, I suppose, the inside of these buildings, the previous slide, sorry, I'll actually just go back just for 1 second on this one. For those of you who haven't been to Letterfrack, we're just on the cusp of Mayo and Galway on the border, just with Killary Harbour to the west and northwest of us. And in the image here, you'll see the Diamond Mountain, which is part of Connemara National Park. And the reason why I'm pointing that out is part of the collaboration in these is with Connemara National Park. and you're looking into the 12 bends and beyond into the mountain range. And the old building here is the old Christian Brothers building, the Reform School, built in the 1860s. And then next to it is these modern buildings designed by O'Donnell and Toomey and built in the year 2000. And this is the interior of one of those buildings, the machine hall, where we would house a lot of our machinery. So students here are learning a lot of the skills that they would need to enter the industry, very practical skills combined then with a suite of academic and applied technology. And the teaching and learning is very much focused on that. It looks at creative, digital and practical skills, also applied technology, looking at particularly at work-based learning. So we have a very strong placement program with industry. So students would enter various different sectors within the industry, everything from medium-size wood manufacturing, interior fit out, joinery companies. Sorry, my presentation looks like it's running away on me a little bit. And we have a very strong focus, obviously, on wood and wood products and complementary materials. In relation to the snapshot, I suppose, and this is the context, we would often view the forestry sector as we've got 11.5% forest cover, and obviously conifers making up about 80% of that, with a very strong market we would see for softwoods and particularly things like MDF, OSB, materials that we would use ourselves in furniture. And about 30% of that we expect is about it goes to export market. And then we look at maybe the poor cousin, which is the broadleaf sector, which is predominantly what we use in terms of wood material, where we have a lot of mixed quality, a lot of it used for crafts and furniture, and also the firewood market, which is quite a buoyant market. And we estimated about 95% of hardwoods for furniture, joinery, interior construction is imported. So we've come to a situation where a lot of our students are not connected with the materials that they use. And today's presentation is about how we went about trying to recreate those connections. And I mean, Foster would have said that whole area of knowledge fragmentation has also led to this disconnection between people and the materials and their environment. And I guess we deal with that on a daily basis in terms of trying to, I suppose, undo some of the damage that the industrial world has done in that respect. And also, though, we see that users of timber products do not always consider the forest ecology, and then foresters do not always consider maybe the optimum timber utilization. So we looked at a 4-stage process about how we might actually reconnect some of these broken connections. The first one is connecting students with materials that they use. The next is promoting the use of local and sustainably sourced Irish grown hardwoods. Next is applied research and innovation. And the last one is connecting foresters with end users. So I'll take you to the first 2 of these stages, and Sean is going to take over on the presentation. And I'm just mindful that I think our presentation is on an automatic slide mover, and it'll keep me moving as quick as we need to. But forgive me if the slides move a little bit and I might need to go back. So in terms of stage 1, this was an issue, I guess, for all of us, where students are using materials, but they're just coming to them in planked form, dried, kiln dried. We would have used Irish grown timber in years gone by, but it actually became very hard to source, and the quality of it was very mixed. So we ended up ourselves using predominantly North American hardwoods and European hardwoods. And while we would have been very conscientious in our procurement and specifying FSC and PEFC certified timber, students really weren't aware of where the timber was coming from. And so we felt there was a need to establish some connections in that respect. So in 2015, we established a community native woodland scheme in partnership with Connemara National Park. And this was under the native woodland scheme. We planted over 5,000 native trees, 9 different species over a sort of 2.5, 2.6 hectare plot. And this was a fantastic community initiative. We have all different community groups involved in it, but particularly our students. And every year we have a replanting day during the National Tree Week, where we bring students up and we get them involved. So every student in their time with us in GMIT actually plant trees in their local area. Another initiative that we did to try to connect students with the materials that they're using is a graduate tree initiative, and this was led out by Sean himself, where we get students to actually plant, first-year students to plant an acorn. In this case, I don't think it's always acorns, but we have a supply of acorns from Cuilcha Nurseries. And as the students spend their time with us in college, we end up with these lovely saplings. And actually at the last graduation in 2021, it's the first time we actually gave out the graduate trees to our students to take away and plant. And we asked them to take them away with them and plant them, and actually send us photographs of where they've planted them, and maybe to keep connected with us through the trees as well. Stage 2 of these building of connections is local and sustainably sourced Irish grown hardwoods. How could we actually manage to increase our engagement and use of these materials? So we approached Coford a number of years ago through the Department of Food, Agriculture and the Marine, and Eugene Hendrick was, I suppose, a very strong proponent at that stage in the Coford research group. And we availed of a grant. We applied and were supported by the department to establish our own processing unit actually on site. So this was a facility for Irish hardwood timber. And I suppose for us, it was very important. We were building capacity for both research and utilization. And we established, I think this was in 2017/18, we bought a 6 cubic meter steam kiln from Kiln Services in the UK, a portable saw. It's a Norwood HD36. The Saw Doctor was the supplier here. And we built a timber drying shed, and Halcon Steel were the supplier. And the reason just for giving you those is we feel this is a really good opportunity to do and replicate around the regions in Ireland. The capital cost here is approximately 125,000 euros, but this has enabled us now to actually manage our own supply of timber. And what it's done for us is in 2021 on campus, we went from 0 Irish hardwoods and material being used. And when I say hardwoods, we do use obviously softwoods as well, but predominantly it's hardwoods. But we actually have a whole range of timber that comes through. And about 50% of the timber that we use now is being is actually sourced from Irish continuous cover woodlands, and also locally and sometimes regionally felled trees. And what's really nice about this, I suppose, is that students are now involved in all stages of timber conversion and seasoning. So instead of us doing the theory of seasoning and the theory of timber conversion, as students are down, they're actually seeing it happen. And this has been a real game changer in terms of the application of this type of learning in terms of students' engagement with their own knowledge, which usually would have been a very theoretical approach. And what we're seeing come through on this is students then in their projects, in their design projects, in their making projects, we see students now engaged with all stages of the tree life cycle, and students having a greater connection, I suppose, with the origin and also the value of the timber itself. And we see students being able to weave the stories of the trees and maybe the origin of the trees into the design process itself. So some examples here in this slide are projects with elm that's been sourced from Clifton. I mean, who would have thought we had an elm tree in Clifton that we probably got about 2 cubic meters of the most beautiful elm from a house where a tree was coming down. Ash from Kylemore Abbey. So we have quite a large estate in Kylemore Abbey close to us, and regularly trees either come down through storms or through diseased trees, and they're offered to us for use in the college. And we have actually a very nice piece of cedar from Adair Manor that we got about 5-6 years ago. We have one of the trees from Trinity College on campus seasoning at the moment. We've gotten a beautiful piece of sycamore from Westford House that was destined for firewood. Very little economic value for firewood, but the value and richness that comes through using it in furniture projects really does, you see that added value. And then also we've got beech and some ash from Horse and Neutron. So we've had a lovely project with the President of Ireland, who presented us with trees that came down in some of the storms in 2013. And we took those and we did a lot of projects actually with the President and in conjunction with the ORIS. And this is just a couple of other projects before I pass you on to Sean. This was a project we did with the OPW. They approached us and asked the students to design a commemorative box or a flag memorial vessel. And this is for deceased members of the Parliament for Dáil Éireann. And when a member of the Dáil dies, their family is presented with an Irish flag in their memory, and we were asked, would the students design boxes or a flag, a vessel for that flag. And this is Mairead Busman, who actually won the prize, the overall prize, and her vessel is going to be recreated by the OPW for going forward. And this is a beautiful piece of Irish elm, and the little black piece here, this little pillar, represents the deceased member of the Dáil, and there's the exact number of Dáil members are represented by each of these small little columns. So it was a lovely project, super for the students to be involved in, but also showcasing Irish timber in all its glory. So some wins for everybody, I suppose. Just two examples then before I do pass you on to Sean of where you start to maybe see a little bit of innovation and creativity coming through and maybe using some funding vehicles as well. On the left is an innovation voucher we did with Enterprise Ireland Innovation Voucher with a local brewery in Clifton, and they were looking for a new bar topper for their beer, and their current one was just a little bit dated and got lost with all the lights of the big Heineken and Budweiser ones. So we did a product, and we had a researcher, John Galler, work on this. And this is this is made from Clifton, beech from Clifton itself. So the timber is from the same area and region as the brewery. And these are, I suppose, illuminated with LED lights and different lights for the different types of beer that they have. Really interesting project, great learning. And also very effective in terms of promotion of their own brand. And then this was just a local cycle club, the Tour de Benz, who, and it's my pet hate, getting medals and seeing medals being created by and given out, and the extraction of raw material from the earth for quite a pointless exercise. We sort of switched that around and said, well, could we make them out of timber? And could we actually think about a circular sort of approach to that? So this is sycamore from Westport that would have gone into firewood. We designed a medal that could be used and given out, but also this is used as a coaster. So we made it so that it's designed to actually be used as a coaster for your cups when you're finished, and a cup was given out with the goodie bag at the race. So again, and we use the back of this to explain the project a little bit and raise awareness about why they were getting a different type of medal, and went down very well. So just ideas, I suppose, in terms of innovation and that you can do, and also raising awareness. So I'm going to hand you over to Sean, and I'm going to take control of the presentation. So I'll try and keep up with Sean.
I'll just remember to unmute. Thank you very much, Dermot, and good evening, everybody, and a special thank you to the organisers for the invitation to speak here this evening. Hopefully you can all hear me. Dermot, can you hear me there?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on then to stage 3 then of the 4 stages Dermot mentioned earlier, and this is looking at applied research and innovation. I suppose, like, we've been interested in and involved in research and innovation, I suppose, over the last number of years. Obviously, the main crux of what we do is furniture and wood products, and a couple of the next projects that I'll talk about are kind of involved in that area. But these are 2 European Erasmus Plus funded projects, and we heard Uwe speaking earlier from Innovawood. We're members of Innovawood here in Letterfrack. And the first project I'm going to talk about is Mimwood. I was interested to hear Aine and Alex talking earlier about Simwood. When we were involved in a European project called Mimwood, and I suppose where this came about was there was a recognition that there was a skills shortage in the area of innovative and new materials in the furniture and wood products industry. And this was seen to be holding companies back, that they found it was very difficult to get workers that were able to, manipulate and use the new materials. So it wasn't possible for them to innovate as easily into new materials. So the idea behind this project was that it would sort of, I suppose, get around some of those shortcomings. And the issue was that a lot of the vocational training centres teaching students, they didn't have the use or these new and innovative materials on their curricula. So then when students graduated, they weren't that knowledgeable on the materials, I suppose. So it was a fairly successful project, and one of the good things about it was the fact that it was open sourced and freely available to students and teachers across all of Europe to help them in that area of innovation and new products and that. So that was the first one. The second one then is called Wood Digital, and this is a current ongoing project at the moment. And the purpose then of Wood Digital was to improve the digital skills, such as those in Industry 4.0 of young European students in the wood and furniture sector, not just students as well, young workers from kind of 18 to 35. And the approach that this will be taken is that it's work-based training. So it's a kind of a dual type of training, work-based training. And the idea with Wood Digital then is, firstly, the group will identify the digital skills and competencies needed in the area, and they'll design then and develop curricula to meet these needs. And finally, again, like Mimwood, this material will be open sourced and available, again, free to students and teachers all across Europe. Okay, Dermot, thank you. So the next project then I'm going to talk about is our masters, ongoing masters. It's at this stage, it's all but complete, almost complete after 2 years. And I suppose we probably should have called this ALDER 4.0. As you can see there, the title of the project is looking at the exploitation and utilization potential of small diameter alder, Alanus glutinosa, and our student, some people on the call might know him, might have heard of the project already, but Colin Marin is the student, and we can see him on the right hand side of the photograph here. The supervisors then are myself and Dermot on the call here on the presentation, and many of you will know Dr. Aine Short, who is a Teagasc forestry researcher, and that kind of collaborative project between Teagasc and ourselves in supervising in Colin, the Walsh Scholar, has been, I suppose, it's been a really beneficial and kind of worthwhile partnership. Hopefully it'll continue on into the future in other master's projects and that. I suppose just before we move on to the next slide, the photograph is showing some of the alder logs, the small diameter logs. I think they were between 20 and 30 centimeter diameter. And I suppose you can see from the pictures, they're a mix of quality. Moving on then, Dermot. So just to give a little context to the project, we know from research that over 75% of broadleaf forestry in Ireland is under 35 years of age. So this kind of, from that we can extrapolate, well, a lot of the broadleaf forestry is young. So I suppose thinnings and that, and people on the call will know more about this than us, but a lot of the thinnings will be going towards the firewood industry, which is very buoyant and viable at the moment. But is there an opportunity there until a time comes when we can harvest mature sawlog? Is there an opportunity to raise the value of forest thinnings? Can we put it to a different market than only firewood? And I suppose you know, that was one of the areas that this project was going to address. The other thing about maybe putting these products into other markets would be the idea that we could lock up the carbon for a bit longer, and in so doing help the climate crisis maybe that we're in at the moment as well. So we know that there is a potential to replace poplar and aspen. They're similar species, I suppose, imports which exceeded over 1 million in value in 2020. So could we substitute alder for some of those species? And we know that this happens in other countries around the world, for instance, the United States. I know that red alder at the moment is one of it's in the top 4 exported hardwoods in the US. So can we kind of take advantage of some of that market? And I suppose, as I mentioned a second ago, the primary use of small diameter hardwoods in general, I suppose, would be firewood, and at pretty low value at around €50 a ton, or down to that level. Okay, Dermot, next slide, please. So looking at the progress so far, then we found it quite positive. As I said, the project is nearly at an end, so we have a lot of the results. At this stage, we found that or Colin would have found that the material is proving very stable. So we know that mature alder is quite stable anyway. And one of the issues with juvenile wood is that it's a bit unpredictable in the way that it shrinks and warps and twists and that kind of thing. And that in general, it can be unstable. But we found actually the alder is pretty stable, quite stable, and suitable for certain furniture applications and that kind of thing. One of the big things Colin found was that it's quite suitable for very aggressive drying schedules. And that's, you know, really interesting and really important in the fact that if we can dry the timber really quickly without having a huge amount of defects, drying related defects, then it's going to reduce the unit cost of the material a lot. And we can get it from kind of log to saleable boards very, very quickly in a very short period of time. So that was interesting. We found there's little differentiation between sapwood and heartwood, in particular related to color, I suppose. And that means, I suppose, the added benefit that we can use all of the log if there isn't much of a color difference. And as I said earlier, then it has many similar properties, mechanical and usability properties to mature alder. Thanks, Dermot. So some of the main findings then from Colin's research, I suppose, just to mention, and we touched on it earlier when we were looking at the photographs of the logs, it was important to note that the alder logs weren't graded in any way before they arrived in Letterfrack. So we kind of got the good, the bad, and the ugly, which was interesting regarding the results. That I suppose if there was a bit more grading, if a bit more grading took place, or if grading did take place, then the results might be even better than what Colin achieved or saw. So that's an interesting point, I suppose. He found that overall the workability and the machinability results were very, very strong. So he did a number of tests, and we found, or Colin found, that the material didn't need a huge amount of sanding after machining, like the likes of routing and profiling, which again would reduce the unit cost in making products out of alder. He found that it was quite easy to achieve a high quality finish, which is interesting. Again going to result in a fairly high quality end product, but also reduce the unit cost in the manufacture as well. And I suppose although the results were very, very positive, we think it's just important to note again that it is a relatively low sort of density species, and a lot of the mechanical properties were low relative to other hardwoods such as ash, oak, and beech, and those kind of species. So it's not suitable for all structural applications, but for non-structural applications, which a lot of furniture would be in that bracket, we found it actually quite suitable. Thanks, Dermot. So again, I suppose some of the experimental products that Colin would have undertaken and other people involved in the project, based on the working properties and particularly the working properties that he found with the alder, it was decided to make a number of products that might be suited towards it. And one of them was as you can see in the photograph here, a small cabinet for a retailer to display beeswax products. So she could carry it around and you know, show it to potential retail outlets as a point of sale kind of product or display product. And she found it, as you can see in the photographs, like it looks very well. The aesthetic quality of the material is very high. It was very lightweight, which suited this particular product. And it does, the material has a very rich feel to it, I suppose. It's very like, or quite like cherry, which is a much more expensive timber, I suppose. And then Colin looked into a couple of other potential replacement markets, and one of those was the architrave skirting market. The idea, the fact that the small diameter alder was quite stable lends itself to that area, and the fact that, you know, it takes a finish quite well, so it could be painted quite easily. Another area he looked into was the area of using the wood in post-primary situations for, you know, in schools to practice woodwork and to make wood products in schools out of. And, you know, again, that area that he looked into seemed very, very positive, and some of the feedback that he got from teachers and that was very positive. And interesting enough, we've been speaking to a number of people in the last while, and, you know, other people seem to be getting in this area, and I suppose supplying native timber, homegrown timber to schools in their area. And I was just on a call yesterday talking to somebody doing that. So that's really interesting, and it's interesting that you know, that feedback is being disseminated out of this project and being directly of benefit to producers and obviously users as well there. Thanks, Dermot. So moving on then to stage 4, kind of, I suppose, closing the loop altogether, connecting foresters with end users. I suppose before we started, or since we've started this journey, we've learned a huge amount. One of the events that we got involved in back in 2018, I'm a member of Pro Silva Ireland, as Aine mentioned in the introduction there, and you know, maybe prior to my involvement in Pro Silva and other organizations like that, I suppose I hadn't huge knowledge of the raw material area, the produce, you know, the produce of the forest, that area higher up the value chain, I suppose. And I think, you know, as I've been involved, I've found the same, and Dermot mentioned it earlier, that maybe foresters or producers, maybe some of them may not know, you know, a huge amount about the end users or the end markets for their product. So this is one initiative that we organized to kind of bridge that gap, I suppose. And it was the 2018 October Field Day. It was held on site in Letterfrack, and it was you know, the feedback was that there was great engagement, and it was an excellent occasion, I suppose. The first half of the day involved a tour of the facilities and some demonstrations, as you can see in the top photograph. And then in the second half of the day then involved a panel discussion on, I suppose, you know, collaboration and new markets and things like that, particularly for broadleaves. I suppose that's our main area of interest in Letterfrack, or area of knowledge, I suppose. And so that panel discussion was chaired by Paddy Purser in the photograph here on the right. He was the then chair of Pro Silva Ireland. And on the panel then we had Bill Vernon, who is a forestry consultant. We had Liam Byrne, who's the current chair of Pro Silva Ireland and forestry contractor. And then we had John Gallagher, who was, I think Dermot mentioned him earlier, as a researcher in Letterfrack at the time, and a very good furniture maker as well. And then I suppose further collaborations then, with kind of, again, closing that loop between the users and the producers. We've been involved with the Hardwood Focus initiative. And this initiative was, I suppose, set up by the Limerick and Tipperary producers group, overseen by Jonathan Spatsy, a forestry development officer in the area. And the picture on the left is just showing, as part of some funding that the Hardwood Focus group got back in 2019, I think it was, we undertook a visit to a study tour, I suppose, of in Wales, This photograph was taken in a forest in Wales. So our involvement with the focus group, I suppose, was twofold, two main projects. The first one was looking at kind of initial log testing with them, a little bit like Colin's project, but to a lower level, I suppose, kind of feasibility testing. And we looked at, again, small diameter logs, various species this time, and again, a range of quality. And the second project then we looked at then was looking at sweet chestnut for a dresser, a Limerick style dresser. And our involvement there was kind of in seasoning and drying, and then providing some advice on the material and on drying. So the photograph here shows some of that initial testing and the species. So we had a mix of cherry, ash, beech, oak, and the sweet chestnut obviously then. And the photograph on the bottom right shows the finished, an image of the finished dresser, or sketch of the finished dresser, and the stack on the left then is the sweet chestnut stacked and ready for kill and drying. And that project is complete at the moment, and again, another very successful project made from small diameter chestnut. So another kind of undervalued raw material and a very sort of high quality, high value output from it. Thanks, Dermot. So kind of bringing it all together for us, I suppose, that collaboration between the user again and the producer. I mentioned there that I'm on the committee of Pro Silva Ireland, and another member of the committee, Sean Hoskins. We'd often be chatting about raw material, and Sean had mentioned that he was getting some timber kind of ready for sale. I suppose Sean, at the time, he was managing some woodlands in Boris House in County Carlow, and he obviously mentioned that he was managing them under CCF style of management, I suppose, to balance ecological considerations with commercial harvesting. And he was getting some timber ready for sale, and would we be interested in buying it? So myself and some other colleagues went down to Carlow, and we looked at the potential timber that they had for sale, and we talked to them about what we were looking for as users from our point of view. And Sean spoke to us about then from the management, I suppose, or the silvicultural point of view. And we'd always been, one of our main ethos in Letterfrack has always been sustainability, and we'd always been, even when we were importing timber or using kind of almost 100% imported hardwoods, we always tried to make sure that they came from sustainable sources. Excuse me. And the fact that where Sean had been managing the woodland was being managed under CCF, that seemed like a perfect fit for us. So we did a deal, as they say, and we bought a load of broadleaves, about 5 or 6 different species, but mainly oak. And the photograph on the middle, or the bottom right there, shows a close-up of some beautiful quarter sawn oak that came from Boris House. And so we would have spent a bit of time thinking about how the logs would be milled. Some of the lesser quality logs might have been cut through and through, and then the high quality oak that we got, that a lot of that was quarter sawn. So we would have had to air dry it and maybe kill and dry it, and then get it ready for use by the students. And in the meantime, then we had some contact with the National Museum of Country Life in County Mayo and Castlebar, and they had built up a collection of a particular type of chair known as the Sligo Tuam chair over about a 90-year period, and they had planned to exhibit these chairs on site in Castlebar, and they invited our students to come and reimagine a chair on an individual basis. All of our second year design students got this opportunity, or this invite, to reimagine the Sligo Tuam chair. And they are at the moment being exhibited in Carlow, or Castlebar in the museum. And sorry, Dermot, just back to the last slide for a second because I won't remember the dates, but it was really interesting when we brought the wood down, had it ready for the students, and we talked to the museum. We found that these chairs, they began to come into being, I suppose, around the same time as the oak was planted in Carlow. was a beautiful fit and a nice story as well. The oak that came from Boris House was planted in about 2 plots there in 1780 and 1820, and the original Sligo Tume chair was being developed for the first time around the same time. So that was a nice connection. I suppose I don't need to get into CCF management. I know we had a very good webinar in this series 2 weeks ago, and I don't need to dwell on that too much, but it just fitted nicely with what we wanted to do. So thanks, Dermot. Next slide, please. And these are some of the finished reimagined chairs by our students. So beautiful, native, homegrown, I would say unique raw material turned into beautiful redesigned Sligo Tume chairs. Beautiful products where the carbon that it was sequestered as the trees were growing is going to be locked up in these beautiful products for a long, long time. And a lovely story, I think, to go with it. Thanks, Dermot. And that's it. That's me, myself and Dermot. And thank you very much, everybody, for listening. I don't know if you want to get back in there, Dermot. But...
Well, there's a couple of questions. First of all, thanks, Dermot and Sean. It's absolutely beautiful, some of the examples that you showed us there. I was trying to send you messages to see if there were any spare ones, because they'd look very nice in especially the chairs in my living room. But anyway, there's been a few questions in the chat and people have been very patient. There's 2 for Uwe, and I just direct them to you first, Uwe. One relates to, I think it's from Samir. He maybe wanted you maybe very briefly to explain more on the concept of cooperative forest management, how that works. And then the second question from Oisin wanted to see if there was anything in the challenge in relation to artificial intelligence and monitoring. Would there be developments in the pipeline in the context of aerial computer-aided estimates of wood volume? Now, they're 2 very different questions, one on cooperative forest management and the other on, I think you can see it there in the chat, computer-aided estimates of wood volume.
Thanks for...
You might have to turn your video off again, Uwe, sorry. Yeah.
Yes, I will do it like this. It's better. Thanks again to for this question, and also thanks to the colleagues from GMIT. Great to see your activities there, and I want to comment on them. They actually are really interesting now in the, this connection between cultural heritage and wood products and forestry. But first of all, I will answer these 2 questions. So yeah, cooperative forest management, that's a big topic. The whole Simwood project basically addressed this question, cooperative forest management in Europe. What is it? What are the different aspects and ways to approach it? I would say the main common bottom line is that you find ways how you bring forest owners together and how can they manage property in a common way, and to reduce costs, improve knowledge exchange, and make things more practical and more effective. But there are many ways to do this. Yeah, there are. The very common and quite successful model is this forest owner associations, and you find many different types and sorts of that in many countries. But it's local groups being organized as associations, sometimes as companies. They usually have a professional forester, professional manager carrying out the cooperative forest management. But then there are also many examples where this gains scale. Yeah, if you go to Nordic countries, you have large forest owner corporations, which include several hundreds, even not thousands of forest owners into one big body. And then the advice and the support that sort of the common body can give is much more focused and much more professional, if you want, than if you stay, on a very local, smaller group level. There are also many traditional ways to do this. We have also looked in Simwood into that. There are many ways of community forests that are managed in a community way. And I think this is also quite interesting for the future, to engage more the society and engage more the people who are not connected to forests, especially also families and children, the future generation, you know, who are sort of lose the connection to the land and to the tradition of managing land. So we could probably organize a whole seminar on that question, yeah. But I would also say there is a lot of experience developed in the Silvicultural project. There's a lot of research going on. Aine also can probably add a lot of their of the work that they have done at UCD on that topic. Yeah, and we need more cooperation like that in the future. There are more also thinking of digitalization. As I just presented in my slides, there are many ways now of platforms, of tools to make this easier to connect foresters and to connect to the management of small units, yeah, of smallholder forests, for example. Regarding the second question, that is mainly about here. Yeah, regarding monitoring and forest inventory and forest assessment in general, there is a lot of technological progress in the last 10 years, and also every year, I would say, because this kind of scanning technologies become really available and become really also available regarding the costs. Yeah, the main technology that is sort of proven now is LiDAR scanning, both terrestrial, so with local teams going in the forest and scanning local stands, as well as aerial, so putting these kind of scanners on airplanes and even on satellites. And several countries are really making big steps forward. For example, Sweden, they have like a very detailed scanning with LiDAR data of the whole country. I think they implement this now every 5 years. And imagine that, yeah. Forest inventories usually take like every 10, every 15 years in some countries. They are only based on sample plots. But now you have like a 5-year follow-up possibility of scanning the whole country, which gives you a much more detailed look into the forest, but also a much more regular follow-up, and you can follow impacts of pests, of droughts, of forest fires, of all sorts of climate change impacts, which is happening all over Europe. Yeah, we have seen forest fires in Sweden, in Germany the last years, which were not expected regarding all these climate models maybe in 20 years or so, but it's happening much faster than we expected. So that's where there's a lot of research and development is going on. And this relates to artificial intelligence as well, how to analyze this, how to model this, how to look into developments further on. A lot of these companies, I also presented some of the examples in the slides. There are a lot of startups and a lot of new companies who are offering this kind of scanning and monitoring solutions now, yeah, as a service or as a technology that you can buy. So I think this is definitely a big field where we'll see emerge even more in the future. Maybe a last thought on that, which maybe links to the presentation that Dermot and Sean just gave. This question of hardwoods and of changing the forest will also become important. Okay, we still have enough spruce in Europe. We still have a lot of conifers in the major countries. The change will not, transitioning to more mixed and to more hardwood forest will not occur that quickly, because the demand side and the supply side is still there. Yeah, the wood industry runs on softwoods. It's their main business model. You can machine this in large sawmills and so on. So if there will not be much more dramatic events, like these pests and this droughts and so on, if this doesn't become really a major problem in the next years, the softwood industry has still enough supplies for another 10 years, 15 years. Actually, because of the crisis and because of the financial possibilities, there are quite a lot of investments now into new sawmills, yeah, into big softwood sawmills, because the market situation is really incredible for them. The COVID hit the economy, but the return was basically that people invest much more in home and in their own homes, in their construction market. And this means that there is actually a higher demand for wood now in the European market, and the production is just going up on the softwood side, yeah, on the let's say big producer side. But climate change is coming. We see this big impacts on forest, and people are starting really more seriously thinking about hardwoods and also of research into wood applications, wood products, using more hardwoods. There has been recently launched a specific research center in Baden-Württemberg in south of Germany, focusing only on hardwoods. In Austria, they are working on this. In France, they have a lot of research going on because they have a large potential in the broadleafed forests. So it's step by step, we see more activities there. And I really liked the presentation before, because I think the real possibility to show that forests are linked to culture, are linked to tradition, are linked to the land. The examples of hardwoods and hardwoods products is really nice. So I think that's a nice direction to go. But of course, economics have to be considered as well. And I know this is quite difficult to make this a profitable business model, but maybe digitalization, maybe this aspect of cultural heritage, cultural identity is a good direction to go. So I will stop here, and maybe there are other opinions and views for people to add. Thanks.
Thanks, Uwe. I think a lot of our questions have been answered there. Some of the questions in the chat answered. So I think at 8:20, it might be time to wrap up. As I say, I found it all fascinating, looking at those beautiful woods and learning about the project that Uwe is involved in. It was, as I indicated, building on a project we were involved in some time ago, and it's about learning from other countries, from other forest owners, some other institutions, finding out how they're addressing problems. There's so much we can learn from each other, and I think webinars such as this one here gives you, the attendees, the opportunity to learn and to hear about all sorts of very exciting things, including European forest research. I think there may be one more question, but I think given that it's 8:20, it might be time. Sorry, Sean, your hand is up there. Do you want to say something?
That's okay. No, very briefly, Aine, I just wanted to come in on something John Sherlock drew attention to there, and I think he's completely right in relation to milling and training in relation to that area, milling and drying. And I think I mentioned about bringing native timbers into schools, but I think if the quality is not great, then it could ruin the reputation. So I think that's important, the skills involved in milling and drying. And just I think it was Oisin O'Connell there mentioned about the residency, the art in residence. There is one interface, Aine, in the Aine Valley in Connemara is such a residency, and our students in Letterfrack are getting involved a little bit in that. So it might be sort of the start of something in that area. Thanks very much.
And Aine, just while I have the opportunity, just say hello to Uwe. We're also members of Innovawood, and I've had great experience with Innovawood. And so it's interesting to meet Uwe online. So hopefully we get to meet in person again sometime soon. Thanks, Aine.
Okay. So look, thanks everybody. Thank you for joining, and mind yourselves, keep safe with Storm Eunice, I think it is. That's probably hitting some of you in the west of Ireland and will be soon making its way across the country. So good night and goodbye. Okay.
Thanks a lot for having me. Bye-bye. Good evening.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.